Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have some big news for you. We're going to go over the Steelers finally naming a starting quarterback. Now we're just down to one team left in the NFL who has not named their starter, that being the New England Patriots, although reports do indicate that they are going to name it tomorrow. So we'll talk about that then. Then we're going to get into some more fantasy football rankings, talking a little bit about the running backs today. We did the wide receivers yesterday. We're going to do 1 through 24 once again, this time for the running backs, before getting into some more news, including a much tighter race in the AL Central, as the Royals have officially tied up the Guardians at the top of the standings. That's going to be a fun race coming down the stretch of the MLB season. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and off our show today, talking about the quarterback situation with the Steelers. Russell Wilson, officially named the starting quarterback in Pittsburgh. We've had a lot of discussions about this specific quarterback room over the last week or so. I know I've been very much out there saying that I think it should be Justin Fields, but to a certain extent, this might make more sense, right? You take a look at the way that the Steelers are built, you take a look at their schedule at the beginning of the season, and the defenses that they're going to have to play. You know, the Falcons don't have a half-bad defense. Then they get the Broncos, kind of a revenge game. The Chargers with Jim Harbaugh are always going to be a grind of a battle. You know, then you have the Colts, the Cowboys, and the Jets, the Raiders. These are all teams that are going to have really good defenses. Is there a place that we're going to see Justin Fields come in and play this season? Absolutely. Areas away unless Russell Wilson is able to return to form, which we haven't really seen that ability so far in the preseason behind that offensive line that the Steelers have been putting together. We haven't really seen that. So unless he's able to get back to his Seattle form, I don't really see a way that he ends up starting the whole season. Now, again, this has been suggested by a lot of people. This is good for the pass game. Is it good for the run game? I don't know. I think this kind of limits their play calling ability, and that's the reason that I wanted to go with Justin Fields, is because, like I've said in the past, I think Justin Fields and his rushing ability is really what is needed in an Arthur Smith-style offense to make the most out of it. I mean, the Falcons have gone 7-10 2 or 3 years in a row under Arthur Smith with a non-mobile quarterback. You get a mobile quarterback in there, this is a guy that can take advantage of that, especially with the way that the Steelers are built. Not that I think it's a huge difference that they're going to fail. We'll do quarterback fantasy rankings later. These two guys would have been right next to each other in the rankings regardless, so it doesn't really matter. I still have the Steelers at 9-8, like we talked about before. Again, I think as far as quarterback skill levels go, they're about the same. Just one is at the tail end of his career, and the other is at the beginning. So, two different ways to look at this situation. I understand this move. I think this was the move that was always going to happen because I don't know how Russell Wilson was going to come over to the Steelers if they hadn't agreed that he was going to be the starter. It just wouldn't make any sense. So him coming over and officially being named the starter, it feels like one of those things that was about time, and Justin Fields just never separated himself from the group. But that being said, I do definitely expect Justin Fields to start at some point, probably after the bye this season. You know, Steelers have a Week 9 bye. They each get 8 games. I think it'd be perfect to figure out if you have a future with the with either of these quarterbacks in Pittsburgh. But let me know what you think of the move. We only have one team left that has yet to name a quarterback, and again, they're supposed to name their quarterback tomorrow in the Pittsburgh in the New England Patriots. They reportedly have already made a decision. It just has not been made public yet. So we'll talk about that one tomorrow. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the running back position for fantasy. I have my top 24 running backs. We'll take a look at where I have them ranked, a little bit of reasoning behind them, and then a few honorable mentions as well. I've got 4 of those to take a look at. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fit, the losing shit. A stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. Feel like I'm losing my mind. Everybody in the world blind. Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. Feel like I'm losing my mind. Everybody in the world.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the Steelers officially naming Russell Wilson as their starting quarterback over Justin Fields. I do still expect a quarterback switch to be made halfway through the season, and I don't think this will affect their record that much, although I still would have started Justin Fields over Russell Wilson. In this segment, we're going to continue our series of starting our fantasy football coverage. We did our wide receiver top 24 rankings yesterday. Today, we're moving on to the other most important position in fantasy football, the running backs. This is a position group that, depending on your strategy, you might rush to take some of these top guys. You might wait to take some of these guys I have rated a little bit lower, but we're going to take a look at my top 24 anyway. Before we get into that, though, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our running back coverage today. As you see here, I've got a beautiful 1 through 24 of my personal top 24 fantasy running backs. And we're starting off a little bit controversial at the top. At number 1, I have Breece Hall. And that's not necessarily a knock on Christian McCaffrey. This is more because since 2013, which is as far back as I could find data on this, since 2013, there has only been one time where a running back went back-to-back and ended up being the running back 1 overall. That was Todd Gurley in 2017 and 2018. And as much as I think Christian McCaffrey is a great player, this is a guy that has an injury history. This is a guy that there have been rumors of them cutting back on his workload a little bit. This is a guy that I think he's not going to buck historical trends. So we need to pick a new number 1, and that new number 1 for me is Breece Hall. Breece Hall is a guy that checks all the boxes you want to. He's a receiving back. For PPR, half PPR formats, that's huge. He doesn't really have any real competition. Now, they did end up drafting a rookie, but he's not really going to eat into the carries that much. He might get a couple drives to spell Breece Hall, but he's not really going to take much of the workload. So that's another checkbox for one Breece Hall. He's also on a supposedly high-powered offense. I know not everyone is on board with this, but I believe Aaron Rodgers still has it in him. People are saying he lost it, but he didn't play last season. He played 4 snaps. That's not enough for me to give up on a future MVP, a future Hall of Famer, 4-time MVP. He hasn't given me anything not to believe in. That offense is going to be great. They're going to be winning games, so they're going to need to run the ball a lot. That is a lot of boxes to check off in favor of Breece Hall, and he's just a really good player. He's my number 1 overall back. And while at the same time, all those things could be said for my number 2 back, Christian McCaffrey. Again, the only reason I have him below Breece Hall is because historical precedent, only one player since 2008 has been able to repeat as that number 1 running back. That is Todd Gurley in 2017 and 2018. So it's not something that is going to continue to happen, but there definitely is a chance. I understand all the conversation around Christian McCaffrey. At number 3, I've got Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is one of those guys that is undisputedly one of the best backs in football. I think him, Christian McCaffrey, just as far as straight running backs, taking the fantasy aspect out of it, are the 2 best backs in football. He can do everything you want him to do. He's one of the most elusive runners, and he can handle a really heavy workload. He leaves the Giants, which not a fun situation for me personally as a fan, but he's going to the best situation he's ever been in his career. The last time we saw something like this happen, that running back exploded, right? This is absolutely built for success for Saquon Barkley behind one of the best offensives in the league with a play action and RPO system that's going to be right there just like he had in New York that he thrived in. This is going to be huge for the Eagles, huge for Saquon Barkley. I have him at 3. At 4, we have Bijan Robinson. And again, I think really the top 5 guys are you can't really miss on. All 5 of these top guys, knock on wood, hopefully they stay healthy. All 5 of them should be top running backs in this league. That being said, at number 4, I have Bijan Robinson, and I know a lot of people have him at 3 ahead of Saquon, but I like the Eagles' offense a little more. I like the connection that he's going to have with, Jalen Hurts, Saquon, and the threat of the run that Kirk Cousins doesn't give to Bijan Robinson. Bijan's going to be great. He might catch a couple more balls. I don't think he has that touchdown upside, though, so I think Saquon is going to take that spot at 3, and Bijan's going to be at 4. At 5, we have Jonathan Taylor, and he's the last of these backs that I feel like are guys that shouldn't get out of the first round. If any of these 5 guys are staring at you at any point in the second round and you don't think they're doing something wrong, in my opinion, I think these are the guys that should be off the board within the first 12 picks, and then you can get into some discussions about the rest of them. But Jonathan Taylor has proven consistently he's one of the best backs in the league. He was great at Wisconsin. He comes into the league, starts dominating. He missed a bunch of games last year. Still, he had a really great season. He was kind of a work share. Getting Anthony Richardson in that backfield with him, again, it's going to provide more rushing lanes because that threat of Anthony Richardson running with the ball is something that Minshew wasn't providing for the Colts last season. That offensive line is one of the best in the league. He should continue to dominate. Jonathan Taylor is my number 5 running back. At number 6, I have Isaiah Pacheco. This is when we get to that second tier of backs, at least for me. Isaiah Pacheco is a hard runner in a really good offense with the Kansas City Chiefs. You want shares of that offense as much as you possibly can. He was really good last year. He was one of the biggest reasons why they were able to make a run to the Super Bowl. He kept the Chiefs in it when they were struggling. Now, I do think he's going to take a little bit more of a back seat this season because the Chiefs got a lot more weapons in the passing game. That's not to say he's to be great. He should get his fair share. I just think he's going to get a couple less touches this year than he did last year. At number 7, they're doing the same thing that they did last year. So he should get a little more touches, but he was still extremely successful last year. And I don't see a reason why he's not going to finish as a top 10 running back in fantasy. At number 8, Travis Etienne Jr. He's a guy that I am a little worried will have a little bit of regression, but the fall off at running back is kind of big here. Travis Etienne, we saw the fall off towards the end of the year last year anyway. If you want to look at his numbers from the end of last season, Travis Etienne before the bye had 16, 4, 13, 7, 32, 20, 19, 22. After the week 9 bye, he goes on a stretch of 4, 5, 8, 13, 13, 5, 3, 23, and 8. So you do see a little bit of that fall off. Now, a lot of that does coincide with a Trevor Lawrence injury, which is going to be a big thing for this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. You know, the pressure goes more on the running back. He had a lot of usage, so maybe we get a little bit toned down, but he's a guy that can catch a lot of balls. He's a guy that can, as we saw, can handle a workload. We might see not every single drive back. Maybe he'll get a little bit of a rest. Maybe Tank Bigsby takes up a couple of drives out of his hands. But he's still one of the more premier talents in the NFL, and I think he should still get plenty of touches, plenty of touchdowns. I'm not that worried about him. At number 9, we have Derrick Henry. And he's due maybe for a little regression. Again, a lot of these guys are going to have slightly worse seasons. Age. He's going to a much better situation, though, a much better running back, a much better running-friendly offense, a much better offensive line. He's not going to go up against stacked boxes. He has the Lamar Jackson effect with him. He should be great. It's a much better offense. He's going to get a lot more touchdowns. I think he'll get less yards, though, less usage. I think the Ravens are going to try to keep him healthy for deeper playoff runs, so they're not going to give him that 20, 30 carries a game that he's used to getting in Tennessee. It's not to say he can't handle it, but I have him down at 9 because I think his workload will be a little bit reduced, but I love him this season. At number 10, I have Kyren Williams, and I know a lot of people have Kyren Williams a lot higher up on their list than I do. And there's nothing wrong with Kyren Williams. This isn't a bet on an injury, the reason that I'm dropping him. The reason is he was very touchdown dependent when you looked at his stats this last season. Scored a lot of touchdowns. There were a lot of short touchdowns. The Rams, I think, are going to get back into their passing offense. You have both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua healthy now, and maybe that opens up the box a little more for Kyren Williams, but he announces the partner. That's never good for injury's sake. I'm not preying on anybody's downfall here, but he was announced as the punt returner today. They also drafted Blake Corum, a rookie that I really like out of Michigan. That doesn't help his chances to be that lead back for the entire season. Another thing that I usage last season with the Buffalo Bills, we saw him get those touchdown. We saw him get a lot of attention from the Bills offense. The running game was going more. He was the first real lead back that they've had since Josh Allen got there, but he doesn't have that top 10 ranking because Josh Allen is going to steal a lot of yards from them, because Josh Allen is going to continue to be that leading rusher. What I love from him is his ability to go out and catch the ball. That's something that a lot of players, a lot of running backs don't have all the time. James Cook is a great runner. He is a great pass catcher, and he's really good for that offense. So I don't see a reason why he shouldn't be in the top 12. And wrapping up the top 12 here, at number 12, rookie sensation Devon Achane. If you look at guys that lit the league on fire, in limited play, Devon Achane did that certainly. He's in a crowded backfield in Miami with Raheem Mostert, who finished as the overall RB2 last year. But if you go by the per-game basis, Devon Achane was one of the best backs in the entire league. In fact, you go to the average, he was 4th in the league, 14.9 points. He had a lot of games off, a couple games that he got no touches in, but he was averaging almost 7 yards a carry as a rookie. He's so explosive. To be cut booster snaps and carries as he continues to assert himself as who I believe will end up being the RB1 in Miami by the end of this season. Those are my top 12. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll go through the rest of this list. We're going to go over the RB2 area of the draft. Let me know if you have any issues with my list so far. But like I said, we'll be right back, finishing up this list here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the first half of my fantasy running back rankings. That is 1 to 12. In this segment here, we are going to finish off my running back rankings, going over 13 to 24, getting through that RB2 area. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon. In this segment, though, we are going to finish up our running back rankings. As we see here, we just went over 1 through 12. Breece Hall down to Devon Achane. We are starting at number 13 with new Packers running back Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is a guy that just 2 years ago was the overall RB1. He's a guy that goes through hot and cold seasons, so this might be a season for him to be a hot name. But I don't feel like the Packers are very good at getting their running backs, especially non-pass catching running backs, to the top. Josh Jacobs is a guy that is supremely talented on the ground. He's still young. You go back just 1 season ago, he was awesome. Again, best fantasy running back in the entire league. But he's inconsistent. He comes from the Raiders over to Green Bay. I have my gripes with Green Bay's decision to move on from Aaron Jones, who we'll talk about later. His pass catching isn't at the same level that Aaron Jones was, and that's where Aaron Jones got a lot of extra value from. Josh Jacobs isn't getting those extra catches, which is why he falls just outside of that top 12 range for me. At 14, I have Joe Mixon. And Joe Mixon is a guy that I personally have never really been too high on, but last year he finished as the RB6, got a lot more volume than I expected him to get. He enters a Houston Texans offense that let Devin Singletary rush for almost 900 yards last year. He is better than Devin Singletary. He should hit 1,000. Again, doesn't quite make that RB1 cut because he doesn't have that receiving upside. Everyone in the RB1 cut, with the exceptions of Isaiah Pacheco and Derrick Henry, really have that receiving upside that gives them that extra boost. But Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, they fall just outside because they do not have that. At 15, similar situation to these other two. David Montgomery. David Montgomery might surprise a lot of people, finished as the overall RB9 last season. He was a touchdown machine, finishing up at the goal line. He was the Lions' goal line back. He was also kind of the lead back. Jahmyr Gibbs, as far as an actual football player, took a backup role to David Montgomery. And what we've seen in the preseason and what we've seen from Lions camp doesn't really show that we expect it to change much. Again, Jahmyr Gibbs should improve, which means we see a little bit of a drop-off from David Montgomery. But I've seen David Montgomery go back as far as the 10th round-ish. That's way too far back for him. That's great value if you can get David Montgomery back there. He's a guy that I love, solidly up in that RB2 range, should be a steal for a lot of drafts. At 16, Aaron Jones, and he's kind of going in a similar range to David Montgomery, maybe even a lot further back, about 20 picks back, I guess. Aaron Jones is a guy that I personally love. Aaron Jones, I love his ability. He might be a top 3 pass-catching running back. It's hard to overstate his pass-catching abilities, but you don't see a lot of running backs catching over-the-shoulder balls, running down the sideline on go balls, right? That's not something you see a lot of running backs do, but that's something that Aaron Jones has in his skill set. That's something that he has. If he can stay healthy, Minnesota should be a good spot for him. That is a very talented offense. The offensive line is good enough. It's not really too big of a downgrade or upgrade from Green Bay. The quarterback situation's a little more iffy, but he should benefit from that, getting a lot of checkdowns and dump-offs. Again, his explosiveness, if he can stay healthy, he should be a great pick. I have him at 16. At number 17, I've got Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert, who again finished as the overall RB2 last season, I think he's going to take a little bit more of a backseat, not just because he's a little bit older, but also because Devon Achane is going to be healthier, I believe, and should take a bunch more carries away from Raheem Mostert. That doesn't mean he's not going to be good. He's still draftable. He's another one of these guys that's falling way back. ESPN has him rated as like the RB30, which again, way too low in my books. He should absolutely finish as a top 20 running back. He's not just going to fall off the face of the earth. He's going to take a dip, but he's not going to disappear. Raheem Mostert should be on your draft boards, especially if you can get him much later in the draft. At 18, I have Kenneth Walker. Kenny Walker is an explosive back. He does his thing. He's not flashy, right? He isn't going to score 45 points in a week, right? But he's a guy that's going to be consistent. He's a guy that's going to give you 12, 13, 14 points a week, maybe a touchdown in there as well. This is a guy that you can put in as a RB2, high-end RB3, and you should be confident with it. He's a guy that you can kind of set and forget about. The Seahawks are going to run the ball a lot. This is going to be good for them. I really like Kenny Walker this year. And along the same veins, my 19th running back is James Conner. And a lot of people might say, why James Conner so high? James Conner is another guy that I think is being very undervalued this year. You look at the Cardinals' offense once Kyler Murray came back into the fold at the end of last season, they were so much better. Kyler Murray was able to power this offense, but even without him, overall, if you go by average fantasy points per games, James Conner finished 7th. He didn't finish in total points 7th, but in average per game, he was 7th. He had 5 yards per carry, which is really, really good. He's just been the picture of consistency at the running back position, and I don't really expect that to change. The offensive line got better. The receiving weapons got better. The quarterback situation for the whole season is going to get better. James Conner is a really good late round draft steal, I think. He's not going to be your RB1, but if you can grab him as your RB2, especially for value in some of these later rounds, he is absolutely worth taking that pick on. At number 20, Alvin Kamara. And this is kind of the opposite story. A lot of people have Alvin Kamara a lot higher up, especially with that pass-catching upside. But he was atrocious last year on the ground. He had 3.9 yards per carry, by far his worst 649 yards, worst of his career. He's not getting any younger. He continues to get worse. The offensive line gets worse. He's lost a lot of his elusiveness as he got older. Where he really thrived last season, and the reason he had many fantasy points is because Derek Carr threw him like 15 balls a game. I don't expect that to happen again. Again, that is not sustainable production. You can't look at a guy and be like, all right, you're going to get me 15 carries, 30 yards, 12 catches for 20 yards. That's basically what he was doing. Maybe he sprinkled in a touchdown or two, right? This is not a guy you can count on every week in, week out for fantasy, unless he's getting an insane amount of catches and targets, unless he's getting an insane amount of touchdowns. And I just don't see that out of Alvin Kamara this year in the Saints. I think they're going to try and do something else, focus a little more on a guy like Chris Olave, try and develop the wide receivers, a little slowdown on the dump downs to Alvin Kamara. But I could be way off on that. He could catch 15 balls a game, and that could be something. I still think he drafted a little bit too high, though. At 21, Ramondre Stevenson. Another guy that's going to get all the carries, all the touches. A bad offense, he's going to be something they rely on. It's a bad offensive line, though, so he's not too high. I love Ramondre. I think he's a really talented runner. The backup is Antonio Gibson. Ramondre does have the ability to catch this. I think they forgot how to use him last season. Again, they didn't have offensive coordinators, but this is a guy that can do it all, has shown the ability to be a workhorse back. He's worth a flyer. He's not a guy that's going to be a league winner, I think, just because of how atrocious the offense is going to be, but he's worth a flyer, I think, in the later round. Then we get to Zamir White. Zamir White at 22. Zamir White is a rookie, or not a rookie, he was a rookie last season. He comes in, he's now the lead back in Vegas. A lot of people are high on him. I'm a little lower on him just because we haven't seen him do it at the NFL level. I think he has the ability to explode, but sitting here at 22, I just don't have the biggest amount of faith in him. And the same thing with Rachaad White. He's a guy that kind of was like Travis Etienne, although he didn't have as many of those big weeks. He finishes the running back 8 overall, but when you look at his averages, especially down the stretch of the season, he had a lot of really poor performances. He was a little bit touchdown dependent, and I'm not trusting him to repeat his success from last season again. He's down at 23. And 24, rounding out my top 24, is Javonte Williams. I think he's a guy that could potentially be really good. He finished in the top 12 of running backs when he was splitting with Melvin Gordon. He looked like he was primed to take that next step. He's officially 2 years back from an ACL injury. He should be all the way back. Sean Payton and a good offensive line, along with Bo Nix, who is going to settle for a lot of checkdowns. They're going to run the ball a lot. We've had the same kind of dilemma with him before last season, which is why he's down at 24. But I personally believe in him. I think he can be really good. Now we get to our honorable mentions. These guys are down here because I'm not sure what's going to happen with their quarterback situation or, injuries. Nick Chubb is my first honorable mention. He's a guy I think should be able to bounce back. He's missing 4 weeks, though, so that's going to push him a little bit back outside of the top 24. The Browns love to run the ball, though, and if he's able to return to even like 3/4 of his form from when he was really doing his thing, this is a guy that should be easily RB1 average. Now, I don't know if he'll get all the way up there, though, but you can get him in double-digit rounds. He's worth pulling the trigger on if you already have a couple of solid running backs. I also have the Steelers running back pairs. Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris. Those two guys, I wonder how well that offense is going to go. I made this list before the Steelers officially announced their quarterback. They're sitting in my honorable mentions. They could each have a breakout season. Jalen Warren starts injured, but both of these guys should run the ball a lot. Should get a lot of chances to run the ball in that Pittsburgh offense. So we'll see what they can do. I think they'll both have startable seasons. And my final honorable mention is DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift joins the Bears in an offense that I think is going to be very air heavy, very pass oriented. I think he's not going to get as many touches. I also don't love his running style. He likes to go east and west a lot. I think he needs to go north and south, just a little bit more. But I do like DeAndre Swift. I think he's very good. He could sneak into this top 24 list. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who was I way off on? Who did I nail? Who do you think should be on this list that I completely forgot about? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Throw it in the comments. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we are going to take a stop into the world of baseball. We're going to talk a little bit about the AL Central, a race that seemed like it was all but over, but last night it renewed once again. We've talked about this a little bit, where the Royals, the Twins, the Guardians are neck and neck. The Royals finally caught up to the Guardians. It's going to be a race to the finish. We will talk about that in the next segment, so stick around. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Network, available.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the running back rankings for fantasy football, 1 through 24. You can go back and check that out. If you have any questions or qualms, go and throw it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. But in this segment, we are going to go over a little bit of baseball. We obviously do our baseball segment every week, but some interesting stuff has been going on in the AL Central, a race that we need to keep our eyes on. The Kansas City Royals